G'day people, Sharon here, welcome to my channel. If you've arrived here from my website and you want to know how to make your embroidery machine turn into a quilting machine, you're in the right place. We're going to make one of my designs from my website, Design 002, on the Memorycraft 10,000. Hopefully you'll get enough information that it will make a lot of sense to you. Let's get going. So we're about to put the fabric into the hoop for my Janome Memorycraft 10,000, which is quite an elderly machine now. It's over 20 years old, but it still works fine. Just going to take the center out of the hoop, fabric in here. Now I'm using what we in Australia refer to as calico. I know in some parts of the world you would refer to it as muslin. It's just a cheap cotton fabric. This is not for anything really fantastically wonderful, so this is going to be the backing of it. I could put nice fabric in here. If I wanted to do that, I would have the right side of it down and the wrong side of it showing up here. Put my hoop in, a little too far there, and put it in. I want it to be firm. It doesn't need to be drum tight, and when you're winding up these screws, don't get a screwdriver out and try and make it go further, because all you really do is thread the screw and then you have to buy a new one, which is not what we want to do. So these particular squares or hoops are 140 mils wide, 200 mils high. I think in North America you call it 7x5. It is the B hoop that came on the 10,000 and the 350E and the 300E, and I think the 9900 and even the 9500 took these hoops. So these hoops, this is the size that I made the designs for. So my design is going to stitch out 140 mils wide and 140 mils tall. We will actually try to sew it in the top part of the hoop, and that way we waste less of the back fabric. I didn't really need this to be this wide. Probably that wide would have been enough. We should probably try and work out exactly what the right width is to do it, so that you waste the least amount of fabric possible. I stitch them on a strip of fabric, so this fabric is the full width of the fabric. And then when I've cut one off, I just move things up and do the next one, and that wastes the least amount of fabric. When I get to the machine, I'm going to lay my wadding on top of this. It is not going to go into the hoop, and we do not need any other stabilizer for these designs. They're very lightweight designs. They don't put a lot of pressure on anywhere. Also at the machine, we will be laying the top fabric over. So that is how it's actually going to go into the hoop or into the machine. And when I get over there, I will choose my design, and I'm going to use design number 002 from my 100 design set. And I'm doing that, it's a single colour design, and it will get you the idea of how these stitch out. Unfortunately, the sewing machine screen strobes when I try to film it. So I've taken pictures. They're not the most beautiful pictures, because you can see a little bit of the strobing effect in those as well. But hopefully you'll understand exactly what I'm getting at. The actual stitch out is pretty easy, and the thread that I'm using is King Tut, and it's in a colour called Jewel of the Nile, which most of the a lot of the King Tut threads are variegated, and they are beautiful, beautiful threads. I've just got a Racent cream coloured thread in the base. That's fine. I'm about to press all the buttons that I've got pictures of, and I'll do it on the machine here. So I want to tell the machine that I'm in embroidery mode, so I push the button with the hoop, then the button with the arrow coming out of the file, Then I need to indicate which file I'm getting the designs out of. And finally, I'm touching the correct file that I want to, stitch file that I want to stitch out. Here I am, just attached to my hoop. As I noted previously, there's the wadding. How thick of a wadding you want to put in there is entirely up to you. I don't recommend the nylon stuff that's very, very thick. Your machine's going to probably not like dealing with that very much. This is actually quite a thin cotton piece of wadding. And now, as previously suggested, I want to move by pressing the arrow that goes up the design to the top of the hoop, and that way I will actually waste less fabric. Holding my needle thread up, press start, and it's just let me know that I haven't lowered the presser foot. These machines are pretty good at letting you know when you've done something wrong. Over here I've done one stitch, and I actually want to try to pull, I did 2 stitches I think, I want to try and pull my thread, my bobbin thread up to the top, and that will mean that I don't, or I'm much less likely to get a nest of fabric underneath. I'll put that there, and hopefully you will now be focusing on the right part. Here we go. Now you can see at this point the machine is starting to do some stitching, and this is what's going to hold the top fabric and the wadding to that backing fabric that we put into the hoop. So I'm going to babysit it while it does this. At this point, because all of those stitching lines have been completed, everything's held together nice and firmly. I don't need to worry about it any further. So now I'm going to let the machine go, press start, let the machine go. I will note that I had intended to change the needle before I started this, and I haven't done it. You may be able to hear a little bit, have been able to hear a little bit of ticking as the machine was doing that square, and that was indicating it probably had a little bit of a hook on the end of the needle, and that hook was actually pulling on threads. So that's one of the things I listen for while I'm doing sewing. Now that I've finished sewing this out, and this is actually the second time I've sewn this out because I had a problem with the first lot of filming. Lift the foot, and I can cut that thread off. Would have helped if I'd got the scissors in the right place. There. Foot's up. The design is finished. Lift the hoop off and cut the thread from underneath. Because this is an older machine, it can't actually cut the thread itself. There's the back of it. There's a piece of thread in here. Because this is fairly low density stitching, that those pieces of thread are not really going to cause any problem. They usually come out very easily. So I'll then take it over and we can cut out a design. So here we are back at the table. If I had done as I ought to have done and moved this design up in the hoop, it would have stitched out up here and I would not have wasted so much fabric. It really isn't something that's really important to me right at the moment, but you can see the design has stitched out in a beautiful fashion. I am going to pop it out of the hoop. Inevitably, there's a big pile of fabric to get out of the hoop. And I'm now going to cut this off. Now, for those of you who don't have a lot of experience with rotary cutters, I'm cutting this off with a slightly less than 1/4 of an inch seam. So I've got a line here that is actually the 1/4 inch. I'm going to put that just inside of my line of stitching on the edge there. The reason I'm doing this, I want the joins between different blocks to be just under 1/2 inch, because that's the easiest way for me to cover them. So I'm going to put it a bit in there. And then always with your cutter, cutting away from you, because if you cut towards yourself, you're much more likely to injure yourself. Same thing on each side. So I'm putting the 1/4 inch line just a bit inside. You don't have to be absolutely accurate. I didn't push hard enough then. Fabric gives, it moves. And in the grand scheme of things, the fabric will stretch between enough that when I line two designs of the same size up, they will be close enough to the same size when I'm putting them together that it won't matter. So there's my final piece. I don't know that you're actually getting the indication of the colours that this thread comes out in. There's bits of green and purple and pink, and it's very pretty, but it's hard to get cameras to achieve the perfect results. So there we are, that's one square done. I will be making more squares, and then on the back, I should show you that as well. You can see the design if it's just done tone on tone. So there it is. I will be making 14 of these to make a bag. Or 14 of them does make a bag. Or I could make however many I needed to cover a whole bed. The particular wadding I've used is pretty thin. It'd be a very summery quilt, but very definitely could be done into a quilt. I ended up stitching out 2 of these designs. One, the first time, where I had things I hadn't moved up into the top of the hoop, and I wasted an amount of fabric, and that's the one you saw me cutting out. This is the second one I stitched out, and I did remember to move it up into the top of the hoop, and as a result there's not near as much fabric that I'm going to be wasting when I cut this one out. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Come back soon, because I'll be stitching out one of my trapunto designs, and they're a bit more complicated. Bye for now.